Tsinghua University. Tagore traveled to Sananigtan in 1901 to establish an ashram with a marble-floored prayer hall known as the Mandir, an experimental school, groves of trees, gardens, and a library. His wife and 2 of his children died there. In 1905, his father died. He got monthly remittances as part of his inheritance and income from the Maharaja of Tripura, sales of his family's jewelry, his coastal villa in Puri, and a pittance in book royalties of 2,000 rupees. He attracted both Bengali and foreign readers. He wrote naively and Koya, and he translated works into free verse. Tagore heard in November 1913 that he had received the Nobel Prize in Literature that year. The Swedish Academy praised the idealistic, and for Westerners, accessible quality of a limited body of his translated literature centered on the 1912 Gitanjali song offerings. He was knighted by King George V in the 1915 birthday honors, but renounced it after the 1919 Jallianwala Bagh massacre. In a letter to Lord Chelmsford, the then British Viceroy of India, Tagore wrote, "The disproportionate severity of the punishments inflicted upon the unfortunate people and the methods of carrying them out, we are persuaded that they are without comparison in the history of civilized governments. The time has come when badges of honor make our shame obvious in their incongruous setting of humiliation, and I, for one, wish to stand by the side of my countrymen, shorn of any special distinctions." Sid Abdul Majid, president and chairman of Anjuman-e-Islamia, invited him to Sylhet for the first time in 1919. Over 5,000 individuals attended the event. In Seoul, a village near the ashram, Tagore and agricultural economist Leonard Elmhurst founded the Institute for Rural Reconstruction in 1921, afterward renamed Shrunken or Abode of Welfare. Tagore used it to try to cool Gandhi's Swaraj demonstrations, which he periodically blamed on British India's perceived mental, and consequently ultimately colonial, degeneration. He asked for cooperation from funders, politicians, and scholars all across the world to liberate villages from the shackles of impotence and ignorance by vitalizing knowledge. He targeted abnormal caste consciousness and untouchability in the early 1930s. He spoke against them, created Dalit heroes for this period of Tagore's life is described by Dutta and Robinson as one of a peripatetic literature. It confirmed his belief that human divides were superficial. During a visit to a Bedouin encampment in the Iraqi desert in May 1932, the tribal head told him, "Our prophet has said that a true Muslim is he by whose words and deeds not even the least of his brother men may ever come to any harm." Tagore confided in his diary, "I was startled into recognizing in his words the voice of essential humanity." To the end, Tagore scrutinized orthodoxy, and in 1934 he struck. That year, an earthquake hit Bihar and killed thousands. Gandhi hailed it as seismic karma, as divine retribution avenging the oppression of Dalits. Tagore rebuked him for his seemingly ignominious implications. He mourned the perennial Calcutta's poverty, and Bengal's socioeconomic downfall was detailed in an unrhymed 100-line poem, whose method of searing double vision predicted Satyajit Ray's film A Pure Sansar. There were 15 new volumes published, including prose poem works Pincher, Shah's Spardak, and Patraput. Experimentation continued in his prose songs and dance dramas, including Chitra, Shyama, and Shandarya, as well as his novels, including Dewi Bon, Malachi, and Shardahiya, Stray Birds, verse 292, 1916. In his final years, Tagore's focus shifted to science, as revealed by Viviparity, a 1937 collection of writings. His reverence for scientific laws, as well as his investigation of biology, physics, and astronomy influenced his poetry, which was rich in naturalism and verisimilitude. In C. Tinsanka and Alpaslan, he incorporated the process of science, as well as the narratives of scientists, into his fiction. His last 5 years have been characterized by persistent discomfort and 2 extended episodes of illness. Tagore's troubles began when he lost consciousness in late 1937, and he remained comatose and near death for a period. This was followed by a similar episode in late 1940, from which he never recovered. Poetry during his valetudinary years ranks among his best. Tagore died on August 7, 1941, at the age of 80, after a lengthy period of misery. He was in an upstairs chamber of his childhood home, the Bosanko House. The anniversary is still remembered. On 30 July 1941, a day before a scheduled operation, A.K. Sen, brother of the first Chief Election Commissioner, received dictation from Tagore, his final poem. I'm amid my birthday. I want to feel my friend's contact with the earth's last love. I shall accept life's final offering, the human's final blessing. My sack is empty today. Whatever I had to give, I gave it all. If I receive anything in return, some love, some forgiveness, I will take it with me when I board the boat that will transport me to the festival of the wordless end. Travels. Tagore visited nearly 30 countries on 5 continents between 1878 and 1932. He sent a stack of his translated works to England in 1912, where they attracted the curiosity of missionary and Gandhi disciple Charles F. Andrews, Irish poet William Butler Yeats, Ezra Pound, Robert Bridges, Ernest Rhys, Thomas Sturge Moore, and others. Yeats wrote the prologue to Ganjala's English translation, and Andrews joined Tagore at Sandyniketon. Tagore began visiting the United States and the United Kingdom in November 1912, residing in Butterton, Staffordshire with Andrews' priest friends. Beginning in May, he taught in Japan and the United States from 1916 to 1917. He was against nationalism. His essay, Nationalism in India, was both mocked and praised, with Ramin Roland and other pacifists praising it. Tagore, 63, was invited by the Peruvian authorities shortly after returning home. He traveled to Mexico. To commemorate the visits, each government made a $100,000 donation to his institution. On November 6, 1924, a week after he arrived in Buenos Aires, an unwell Tagore was sent to the Villa Mirror at the request of Victoria Ocampo. He came home in January 1925. Tagore arrived in Naples in May 1926 and met Mussolini the next day in Rome. When Tagore remarked on Il Duce's fascist flair, their friendly friendship came to an end. He'd already expressed his excitement. Without a doubt, he has a terrific personality. That skull is so full of life that it reminds me of one of Michelangelo's chisels. A fascist fire bath was supposed to entice the immortal soul of Italy, clothed in quenchless light. Tagore landed in Hungary on November 1, 1926, and spent some time at a sanitarium on the shores of Lake Balaton in the city of Blandford, recovering from heart difficulties. He planted a tree, and a bust statue was erected in 1956, and the lakeside promenade has been named after him since 1957. Tagore and 2 companions embarked on a 4-month tour to Southeast Asia on July 14, 1927. They traveled to Bali, Java, Kuala Lumpur, Malacca, Penang, Thailand, and Singapore, among other places. Jaffrey is made up of the travelogues that resulted. He left Bengal in early 1930 for a nearly year-long trip to Europe and the United States. When he returned to Britain, when his paintings were seen in Paris and London, he stayed at a Birmingham Quaker colony. He delivered the annual London Quaker meeting and published the Oxford Hubbard Lectures. Tagore remarked of a black abyss of aloofness while discussing ties between the British and the Indians, a topic he would return to several times over the next 2 years. From June to mid-September 1930, he visited Aga Khan Run 3, stayed at Darrington Hall, toured Denmark, Switzerland, and Germany, and then traveled to the Soviet Union. Tagore, enthralled by the Persian mystic Hafez, was entertained by Reza Shah Pahlavi in April 1932. Tagore met Henry Bergson, Albert Einstein, Robert Frost, Thomas Mann, George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, and Ramin Roland during his other travels. Tagore's final foreign tour included visits to Persia and Iraq and Sri Lanka, and his intolerance of communalism and nationalism only grew. N. Mukherjee, Vice President of India, Rabindranath Tagore, according to Hamid Ansari, heralded the cultural reconciliation between cultures, societies, and nations long before it became the liberal norm of conduct. Tagore was a man who was well ahead of his time. During a visit to Iran in 1932, he stated, "Each country of Asia will handle its historical difficulties according to its power, nature, and necessities, but the candle they will each carry on their route to progress will converge to shine the common ray of wisdom."